Nomonde, I'm so thrilled to have you here. Thank you so much for making the time to see me. I've been really, really looking forward to having this interview. You know, of course, you've done very well in your career. You are an executive of investor relations and strategy. There's so much in your career that I think we can unpack that a lot of our viewers will benefit from. But before we get there, I know a lot of people may not know who Nomonde is. Of course, I know you are a multi-talented, multi-skilled strategy and finance professional. But if maybe you can kick us off by giving us a good overview of who is Nomonde.
Thank you for having me on this platform, Jabu. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to share my experiences and share some of the learnings I've gained in my career so far.
Yeah.
So who is Nomonde? I am a Zulu girl. I'm originally from KwaZulu-Natal. I grew up in the northern parts of KwaZulu-Natal, known as Zululand, in a small town called Ulundi. And I guess I'm a curious person, always have been. So from a young age, I really wanted to have the opportunity to live in different parts of the country. So I did most of my schooling, my primary and high schooling in KZN, and then headed off to Cape Town for tertiary studies. And I'm now based in Johannesburg and have been in Johannesburg for about 10 years now. I also lived for about 6 months in London. So that's sort of the high level story. And personality wise, I'd say I'm a multifaceted person, and that really goes to speaking about the fact that I do have such a broad range of interests.
Yeah.
And I guess my career journey so far is indicative of that, in that I'm a CA by profession, although my career, I'd say, has followed a very non-linear, non-traditional path when compared to how CA careers generally tend to progress. And then also in sort of my personal life, I've got a very broad range of interests. So when people ask me what are my hobbies, I like to say that I collect hobbies because I really do switch between activities. I've tried a multitude of things. So I mean, that's really me in a nutshell.
Fantastic. I say you are multi-talented because I know you are interested in, well, at some point you were interested in being an actor. You used to do drama at school, you were a public speaker, and you are a CA. You know, I'm not sure CA qualification is that exciting in terms of the creative aspect, but why would you decide to become a CA? Was that a childhood dream of yours? Or how did you get to choose that route?
So you're correct. I have changed my ambition around what I want to do quite a bit over my life. As a very young girl in my primary school years, I actually wanted to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And that really goes to speak to the fact that I like helping people. So I really wanted to be a healer in the community. Unfortunately, I discovered that I actually can't stand the sight of blood. So I had to ditch that dream. In high school, as you've already said, I was very involved in public speaking, debating. History was one of my favorite subjects. So was English. So I really did want to go into law. And then I was advised by a very dear aunt of mine that I should really consider the CA route rather. And her reasoning was that, looking at sort of my performance at school as a whole, I was very blessed in the sense that I was good at school and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So I wasn't restricted in terms of what career path to go into from that perspective. And she said, sort of, given that I could go in whatever path, and I am such a person that is interested in a variety of things, I should go down a career path that's going to allow me to flexibility in terms of my career journey. And the CA would be able to do that for me. So that's really how I came to following the CA sort of career path. But I mean, before even the conversation I had with her, there's a bit of a sort of a funny story. In that sort of in my very younger years, may have been 10 or 11, there was sort of a school oral that we had to do. And you probably remember those school orals where you're supposed to stand up and talk about what you want to be when you're older. And I wasn't entirely sure at that point in time. And so my father assisted me with writing this oral. And I mean, I hardly ever got assistance from my parents in terms of homework. But I mean, this one time he said, you know what, you're going to stand up and say you want to be a chartered accountant. And I didn't even know what a chartered accountant was. I mean, at that age, I mean, everybody else in the class was standing up and saying they wanted to be a dentist or a fireman or a policeman or a teacher. And there I was talking about how I wanted to be a chartered accountant and go work for an investment bank. So I guess the seed was planted early. And when I had the conversation with the aunt who advised me about which career sort of path to follow, it was a reaffirmation of something I'd already heard. So I thought, oh, maybe it's a sign. I followed the CA route.
Awesome. Looking at your career, you look like someone who wasn't and isn't afraid of taking on new challenges. The fact that you started investment banking and then later on went to management consulting and then moved into this completely different role in investor relations. What drove those moves? I mean, is it just you felt you were at a juncture in your life where you wanted to pivot, or were you looking for new challenges, or is it just the natural inclination you have to just take on different things that you've not done before?
So I do love a challenge. I seek out challenges. But I'm also driven by learning. So I hate to feel like I'm stagnating in a role. I do need to feel that I'm learning something new every day. So I mean, like you're saying, I do my articles with a bank. I did my articles at Investec, and then stayed on in structured and leveraged finance for a couple of years. And then started thinking that I'm not entirely sure that investment banking is for me. And I guess it's because of that interest in sort of a broader set of things. So I really was, at that point in time, involved more in sort of analytics and number crunching, obviously at that point of my career in investment banking. But what I found really interesting was all the various companies we looked at. I quite liked looking and having to research different industries, different companies, and then understanding how the company worked from end to end. So when I thought, okay, well, maybe I need to look for a change, strategy or management consulting made sense. Because it would allow me to build that skill set, which would enable me to understand sort of how an organization works end to end. Also, going back to sort of my aspiration to go into law back in high school, that spoke to the fact that I like communication. I like communication, whether written, whether spoken. And I wanted to gain the skill set that would allow me to do more of that. And I mean, if you know anybody who's ever been in management consulting, it's sort of like a boot camp for learning everything business related. So I mean, I knew that I probably wasn't going to be doing that over the long term. I was very deliberate about the fact that I wanted to learn a specific set of skills. And then use that to do something else. So I mean, that's how I moved into management consulting. And then when I felt, sort of I'd gotten out of it what I wanted to get out of it, I then started looking for other opportunities. And then this opportunity at a listed company came up in the role of head of investor relations and strategy. Once again, investor relations, something I'd never done, but it was really attractive to me because it brought together quite nicely everything I'd learned up until that point. And what really excited me was the fact that it's a numbers orientated sort of function, in the sense that you're reporting largely on numbers. You need to understand what investment professionals are looking for, and that's literally largely around the numbers, but also there's a very strong communication element. There's a lot of writing, there's a lot of reading, communicating in words, sort of the numbers. So it was a no-brainer for me that this is something that would work for me and my interests. The strategy piece obviously allowed me to use the skills that I'd learned in management consulting. And I mean, I'm at the second organization now in a similar role. And I'm really enjoying it.
That's beautiful. Talking about management consulting, I know it's a very difficult field to enter into. Tell us about your experience there. Firstly, how did you manage to get into management consulting? And how was it?
So it is definitely one of the most difficult things I've ever done. Getting in is a mission impossible. Like it is, the first assessment before anyone is actually going to see you and ask you who you are. What are your interests? What's your background? There's this maths test that you need to prepare for.
Yeah.
And it's literally this 20 question, if I remember correctly, 20 question maths test that you need to study for, but then you write it without a calculator. So I had to relearn long division. So it really takes a lot of determination to get into management consulting, and I really was determined. So I mean, once you get over that, you then start preparing for case studies, and that in itself, I think I prepared for like a month or two before I actually did the first one, and that in itself felt like studying a subject, and each one of the interviews then is that. So it was difficult, but I mean, I thought even if I didn't make it into the organizations that I'd applied to, I would have actually learned something, because I mean, the case studies, the sort of the art around how you go about approaching a case study, structuring sort of a strategy, problem and solution, in itself was learning. And then once you're in, the learning doesn't stop, right? So I mean, they throw you into whatever deep end case is available at the time, and for a CA in particular, what they said is that CAs tend to struggle, or some CAs tend to struggle, in the sense that you've got a numbers background and you've sort of been taught how to unpack numbers, understand numbers. A business revolves around numbers. So CAs tend to come in and think that every problem is a numbers related problem. And most often that is the outcome. That's sort of the what happens at the end. You'll see the problem will be reflected in the numbers, but the root cause itself is in people or processes. So you often have to then unlearn that I mustn't jump to the numbers. Let me actually, properly assess the situation here before I start sort of analyzing the numbers and so on. And the first case I did was a customer experience case, which was obviously unlike anything I'd ever done in my life up until that point. So it was definitely a steep learning curve, and then went on to do various things, mostly around performance improvements, but in different industries, retail, oil and gas at some points, which I thought I never saw myself in, telecoms, financial services, So I mean, great learning, very difficult, yes. I will not lie about that, and I do not regret doing it at all.
Awesome. Well, clearly it's opened many doors for you. When you look back at your CA training, how much of a role did that play in how well you did in management consulting?
So I think, it set me up. It set me up well for management consulting. I think particularly because I did business science. So business science is different to BCom accounting in the sense that first year, so I mean, it's a year extra compared to BCom accounting for starters, and that first year is actually general business. So it's obviously there's the economics and the statistics. There's even sort of like a pure maths thing in there. There's marketing, there's people management, so general business stuff. So I mean, I think that set me up quite nicely, and then CAs are considered sort of general business professionals. So I think I had the right sort of ground level learning to be able to go into management consulting. But I mean, as you know, management consultants come from all kinds of backgrounds. I worked with engineers, I worked with doctors. One of the guys was a dentist before, and he was actually in management consulting for a while, then went back to dentistry. There are lawyers, all kinds of people. And each one of them is in a way set up for success, given their background. But what's really nice is that you get those different perspectives.
And given how diverse that group of people in management consulting is, what are they looking for someone to be a good candidate to be accepted in the field? Do you need to, I don't know, be creative, be a problem solver, be a numbers person? What is the common thing they're looking for?
I would say problem solver,
Okay.
an analytical mind,
Yeah.
and a problem solver. Because I mean, it really is about being able to walk into any business situation, whether you're familiar with that industry or not, and get to the root cause of what is causing a performance issue,
Yeah.
and then be able to articulate that in a very structured way to the management teams, so that you can get their buy-in in terms of the solution you're then going to present.
Yeah.
So there is, so it definitely is about strong analytical ability and a strong problem-solving ability, and then a strong communication ability, which most of us have to then learn there, because I mean, I don't think a lot of people naturally know how to get to sort of articulating quite well what a root cause of a problem is, what are the considerations, and therefore what is the solution, and this is what an execution plan looks like.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Okay, brilliant. When it comes to career progression, the different schools of thought, some people say you must have a clearly defined plan of where you want to go to, what the next steps are. Other people say you take the challenge as it goes. Looking back at your career, which school of thought do you think you fall under? And do you believe it worked out well in the end, or up to now?
I think I took the challenges as they came.
Yeah.
But I've always been pretty sure about the type of work I want to be involved in. And I knew I wanted to follow a very sort of corporate path, work my way up all the way to the top.
Yeah.
But doing things that I really enjoyed. So I mean, there have been instances where I've been approached for roles and people would say, you're the perfect fit, and I think, but I'm not going to enjoy it. So I'm not going to do it, and that's important. Sort of being passionate about what you're waking up to do every day is very important in terms of keeping up your motivation. So even I think, even if you are going to follow the school of thought that says, take it as it comes, you still do need to be very deliberate about what success looks like for you at the end. So I mean, that's how I've thought about it up to now.
Fantastic. And when you look at your investment banking career and management consulting, we won't talk about investor relations for now. Which one did you think you enjoy the most, and why?
I think I enjoyed them for what they were in the time I was doing them.
Yeah.
So I really loved sort of the investment banking sort of energy. I mean, I really like the people, the personality types I got to work with there.
Yeah.
But it does sort of level out in terms of learning fairly quickly, and then people just become masters of their craft. And I guess it was at that point where I could then become a master of the craft that I said, I'm not entirely sold that this is what I want. I want something that is broader. And then went into management consulting, and that was fun for what it was while I was doing it. But once again, I knew coming in that this is probably not where I want to land up, because the frustrating thing for me personally about consulting is that you never get to execute on the plan you deliver. So you get so involved in diagnosing a problem, crafting a solution, getting the buy-in from management around the solution, and then you hand it over. And that for me was frustrating, because I'm a very action-orientated person and I actually love execution. So that's why I knew when I'd gotten to the point where I thought, yes, definitely the learning is not going to stop, but I've learned enough now to take this into a corporate space where I'll get the opportunity to be faced with real problems, diagnose them, craft solutions, and then be part of the execution. Yeah.
To move from being a management consulting into heading up a business unit must have been daunting, I would imagine.
It was very daunting. It was very daunting. But I mean, I think some of the greatest successes in life come from doing things that absolutely scare you.
Yeah.
And I'll admit, I mean, that in those first couple of months, there were days I would wake up and I think I don't know how I'm going to get through today, how I'm going to do the task ahead of me.
Yeah.
But dived in and did it anyway.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was daunting, but I knew that it would also be really rewarding because I was walking into an organization that didn't really have a formalized sort of investor relations function, and part of the job was really creating that.
Yeah.
And so it's rewarding from that perspective in that you get to build and own something. And really be directly responsible for creating something.
Yeah.
So yes, there is the daunting element of it, but the prospect of a really great reward made it worth it.
That's quite interesting. You say you were crafting or setting up the formalizing the investor relations function, and yet previously you were not in investor relations.
Exactly. So there was a lot of learning. I was delivering as I learned. So, but I mean, it also then allowed me to build something that was mine, that made sense to me. And I guess it was interesting every step of the way for me because I was learning something new as I went along.
Did you have people that you would talk to who were in that space, because you obviously didn't have that experience and yet you had to formalize this function? I would imagine you probably had fears, am I doing the right thing? Were the people that you were, maybe they were mentoring you or you were bouncing off ideas from or you were learning from somewhere? How did you make sure you settle in properly?
So what's great about the world right now is that there is information easily accessible about absolutely anything.
Yeah.
So I mean, we did have sort of consulting services that we used for a while until I felt I was comfortable to run things myself.
Yeah.
Obviously, the management team, the CEO, the CFO had views about what they'd seen work, what they hadn't seen work. So they were very supportive. And then I chat to sort of other sort of investor relations professionals around what works, what doesn't work, and did a lot of reading, a lot of research. But I mean, it really isn't, I think, difficult nowadays to move into a space or a function that you're unfamiliar with, because there is just so much information readily accessible about absolutely anything.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. When you look at the fact that you were in management consulting and now you're pivoting to a different role, a number of management consultants have different options. They can go to different places after that. What was so special about investor relations that drew your interest?
So it was really around that combination of being able to work with numbers and words.
Okay.
That really spoke to me. But I mean, I think also the particular organization. So I mean, the organization I went to at the time was AdCorp, is an organization that is focused on staffing, so recruitment as well as training. And I am personally very passionate about skills development. So I was quite attracted to what the organization did, in addition to the fact that the role spoke very well to my skill sets as well as my interests.
Okay, awesome. I would like to believe a number of people may not be aware what investor relations entails. I don't think you go to study for investor relations in an undergrad program or anything like that. Maybe it's out there. I've never seen it. Maybe give us a feel of what is investor relations. What does it entail?
So I don't think anybody studies investor relations. There's an assortment of people. There is a lot of accountants. There is a lot of CAs. In investor relations functions, but not necessarily just those people. So it really is a communication function, and I think more and more your investor relations executive is also becoming responsible for communications and PR, because it is very much a communications function. But it's also a financial function in the sense that you are engaging with mostly the investment community. I mean, sometimes you sort of engage with the financial press as well, but it's largely the investment community around financial results and strategy. So I think for me, it's been quite nice that my role has always been investor relations and strategy, because I'm involved in sort of the development of the strategy with the management team, which makes it so much easier to then communicate it to the investment community. So, I mean, the traditional things around or within the investor relations functions are, half-year reporting. Then there's the year-end reporting, which involves, presentation, results presentation, which most people have seen. And the investor relations team will work with finance in terms of understanding the numbers, and then messaging, creating messaging, how are we going to communicate to the market, basically. And then working with the management team to prepare them to sort of communicate that message that you've decided on, and then it is sort of going out on the results day. There's various documents that we need to get out on the day. There's an investor sort of booklet that goes out. There's a presentation deck, all communication tools. And then also a big sort of project that generally sits within investor relations or sustainability teams is the integrated annual reports, which a lot of people have probably seen. Big document which really tells the organization's story end to end, and really reports on performance as a whole. And increasingly, what's becoming a focus within investor relations functions is ESG. So that whole notion of what is the organization actually delivering beyond the bottom line? Socially, what is the organization doing? Environmentally, what is the organization doing? I mean, and there's metrics, and the investment community is asking for metrics and strategies around ESG, and then obviously governance is obviously a key focus to report on, and to have sort of a solid handle on as a business.
And given the broad array of activities that you've mentioned that are involved in that function, which ones would you say excite you the most, or you enjoy the most?
I enjoy all of them. So I do quite enjoy being able to switch in any day between sort of working with a spreadsheet and then typing up a document, and then sitting with the CEO, the CFO, sort of bouncing around ideas on how we're going to communicate this. Okay, can I understand this aspect of the strategy to make sure that we communicate it, we articulate it correctly. So I mean, I do quite like being able to switch in terms of which side of my brain I'm using, I guess, throughout the day. And I mean, I touched on a little bit on the fact that sort of investor relations executives are increasingly sort of being given communications in general. What's happened in my case is that I'm increasingly becoming involved in marketing, which is sort of communications, but a whole lot of other sort of creative related things as well. And that I find is quite exhausting, because now I actually go from picking apart a spreadsheet in the morning, drawing up a document maybe in the afternoon, and then spending a couple of hours looking at creative. So really using both sides of my brain, which is exhausting, but a lot of fun. Awesome. It speaks quite nicely to somebody who has got a broad range of interests and ensures that I actually don't get bored. I was about to say that actually, that it seems it fits perfectly into your personality, so to speak. Of course, you are an executive, and you became an executive at a very young age, I think. What does it take to become an executive? I believe a lot of professionals, aspire to get to that level. What is the secret to getting to that level? So, I mean, I think fundamentally it's a leadership role, right? So you get people who are very good at what they do. In investment banking, they're called rainmakers, and it's the people who bring in who bring in the money and they're really great at what they do. But that doesn't necessarily always mean that that person is naturally, going to make a good leader.
Yeah.
And I think, so I mean, being able to, I guess, get to that level at a young age speaks to sort of leadership qualities that were identified within me that allowed me to then be able to sort of be able to handle that level of responsibility. Because I mean, I think what most people don't realize is that sort of executive roles are not all glamorous. It is a massive responsibility in terms of you're directly responsible for delivering on particular objectives, and more so you are directly responsible for a team of people. So there is a lot of responsibility that comes with that, and in fact it's sometimes quite challenging for a lot of professionals, because to be a good leader, you actually need to take a step back from the detail. So you've spent so many years becoming proficient at a particular technical skill, and then you get to a level or a position where you're asked to take a step back from the detail and actually focus on steering a team and making sure you reach a particular goal. And that I guess comes naturally for some people, and maybe I'd say that I'm blessed in the sense that it did come naturally and was identified, that it comes, that I've got sort of these qualities.
That's awesome. So obviously you have natural qualities that you believe have helped you get to that level. Are there things that people can do, to build up to that level? Those that don't have that, the natural giftings that you have.
I think so. I mean, there are some obvious principles that one can make sure they sort of work on, and to become a leader or to become a better leader. And I guess, I mean, I can speak to it in two ways, because I've also been very fortunate in that I've reported to CEOs. So I'm fortunate in the sense that I've learned directly on a daily basis from people who are in the most senior leadership positions. So I'll tackle your question from two perspectives. I'll give you what I think are sort of principles or things that people should try to do in order to sort of improve their leadership skills or be a good leader. And then I'll also then speak to some of the things I've learned from the CEOs I've worked with. So in terms of what I think are important characteristics, firstly, and probably the most challenging, is to seek feedback and seek harsh, honest criticism from everyone. So not necessarily only from your direct manager or people that sit above you, but seek feedback also from, the team that you might be working with, and just people across the organization. So for example, one of the things that stuck with me early on in my career was feedback I received from one of the cleaning staff team members at the organization I was working for at the time. Still very early on in my career, the lady came up to me and said, "You know what, Sisi, you look very nice every day. You look very professional. I like the way you dress, but you're always wearing black and gray." and then I said thank you, and I walked away, and then sat and actually thought about this, like did some introspection about what is she actually saying.
Yes.
And what I came to realize was that, I mean, black and gray are serious, somber colors. So what is actually happening is that I'm probably coming across as a very serious person, and maybe even unapproachable. So I'm not a serious, somber person. So let my personality shine through in the way I look. And here I sit in a bright green dress. I still have a lot of black and gray, but I mean, that was feedback from somebody most people wouldn't think to seek feedback from. But it's important to take in a lot of views and opinions on how you're doing and who you are. And then secondly, I would say respect, which I've already spoken to. to be a good leader and to be an effective leader, people need to respect you. And in order for people to really respect you, they need to feel respected by you. You need to earn it. It's a two-way thing. So that's the one I'd say is another key one. And then thirdly, you need to build and sort of invest in having a great team.
Yeah.
I think as human beings, we all like to shine. We all like to be in the spotlight. We all like to be recognized. And what happens is a lot of people will then, want to be the person who stands out always in a team environment. I mean, they're the leader. So, I mean, everybody, probably are looking to them more often than the rest of the team members, but they'll want to then always be the person who's getting all the recognition and the credits. And that doesn't always work because you can only do so much as one individual. So you really do need to invest in building your team, empowering them to make decisions on your behalf, which gives you bandwidth to then do other things. And nobody likes to be micromanaged. So if you then empower the team and give them the voice and the platform to speak, they can go off and do half of what you could be doing, which really frees you up to do other things.
Awesome.
And then fourth, I think I'm on number 4. Be decisive. Nobody likes a flaky leader. I think one of the most frustrating things we've all come across at some point in our career is a person who can't make decisions. And understandably, a lot of people don't like to make decisions because they're afraid of failing. But honestly, failure is part of life. Mistakes are going to happen. I personally believe that if you're going to fail fast. If an idea is a bad idea, it's going to be a bad idea whether you do it next week or whether you do it in 6 months' time. So fail fast, get over it, and move on to success. And then lastly, I would say seek out mentors. And I mean, this is something that for a long time I wasn't quite sure how to do. So how does sort of this whole mentor thing work, and how does it add value? But I mean, seek out mentors, seek out people who sort of inspire you, who motivate you, who look like something that you would want to be, and get their advice. But more importantly, seek out sponsors. So a lot of people are familiar with the notion of a mentor and not so much a sponsor. So and the difference being that a mentor advises, a sponsor advocates. So whereas a mentor is going to sit with you and listen to what you're trying to get to and advise you on the best ways to get there, or based from their experiences, how to get to a certain goal, a sponsor represents you or stands up for you in rooms that you're not in. So they will sort of it's generally somebody who's influential, and quite often people have sponsors within the organizations or the industries they work. And what that person does for you is they will put your name forward for a role, or they will push for your proposal to be sort of approved or accepted. And the thing is that they're obviously lending you their brand. So there is a massive trust element to that. And it's probably trickier to sort of get the right sponsor versus sort of getting a mentor. And I guess the advice I'd give there is that as you sort of progress in your career, be very deliberate about picking your boss, because your boss can quite naturally also be your sponsor. So versus sort of early on in your career where you're chasing after getting certain experiences and getting certain skills, therefore the job you're going into is quite critical. You get to a certain level where the roles you're in are pretty similar, and it then becomes quite key to pick somebody who's potentially also going to be your sponsor. And I think I gave 5 points. Stop counting at some point, but those are the things I would say are key principles for leadership.
I want to zoom in on that last point. So getting a sponsor, it's quite an interesting point. So how do you go about that? You just go to someone you think is influential and say, "Can you be my sponsor?" What's the what's the mechanism of doing that?
Sure. So I mean, the situation I can think of where I've had a sponsor step up for me in situations. It's actually, I mean, like I said, it's easier to get a mentor because you approach somebody and you then sort of have a defined sort of objective you're trying to get to, and then they can advise you on the thing. A sponsor kind of almost happens, and which is why I'm saying, be very deliberate about the boss you choose, because it sort of happens quite organically, and in my case, the individual sort of spotted me. So I think the key thing is to bring the best of yourself to everything always, because you don't know who's watching you. And what typically happens with sponsors is that they'll actually identify strengths in you that you actually not even aware of. And they will actually ask you to stretch yourself and challenge yourself beyond what you actually think you're capable of, because they've been watching you, and they think you can do more. So I mean, it generally is a case where, in my case, it was, the lady approached me and said, I've been watching how you work, and I feel that you can take on a greater challenge than where you currently sit. And I was like, no. And she said, fine, I'll coach you. I know this is a new space. I'll coach you. And I mean, at that time, it's when I picked up sustainability in my portfolio, so at my previous company. And she said, I'm committed if you're committed. Let's do this. So and she advocated that this person is right for taking on sort of a greater level of responsibility. So I said it really is about sort of showing up the best you can always, but also sort of being very deliberate about being in spaces where the right kind of people are seen.
I think that's quite powerful insights. Thank you for sharing that. You were also going to share around what you've learned from, CEOs and CFOs that you've worked with as far as leadership is concerned.
CEOs are generally the most knowledgeable people, and beyond sort of the organization or the work they're doing, they most often have a good handle on current affairs, what's going on in the world, just in general, outside of the industry, are very much aware of trends that are happening, trends that may be coming, and that really speaks to that continuous learning. They are generally people who are driven to continually learn. And I guess I initially then asked myself, but where do they find the time? I mean, most professionals know that finding the time to do the things that you enjoy, never mind now learning random stuff, is very difficult. So the second thing is that a pattern I've seen in CEOs or great leaders or highly successful people is that they are early risers. A lot of them actually are up at 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and that is the time they use to develop themselves. So to do the reading of newspapers, listening to podcasts, but also then spending some of that time on taking care of their own physical and mental well-being. A lot of CEOs I've seen or that I've worked with are super fit people, and they're doing all of that in those 2 hours when the rest of us are getting our best sleep. So that's sort of, those are the two things, two of the things that I've learned. And the third is that as much as a lot of sort of successful people or great leaders or people that a lot of people aspire to, they may not always be the most popular person, and they are okay with that. So if you really aspire to be a very successful leader at some point, or just a leader in general, be okay with the fact that you will not always be liked by everybody, because effective leadership requires unpopular decisions at some point in time. So yes, you need to be likable, but you must be okay with not always being liked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Another powerful insights there. You've mentioned that you've learned a lot from CEOs, and a lot of us know CEOs. We've got them in our organizations, but sometimes we don't know what they do. So maybe you can help us understand, what does a CEO do, given the fact that you've worked very closely with them?
They do a lot of thinking and a lot of forward thinking. And the way I've thought about it is in the form of an analogy. So this is a bit of a sports analogy. As I mentioned, I've tried just about everything, well, a lot of things in my life. And one of those things was rowing. So my high school days, I picked up rowing for a little bit.
Yeah.
So I mean, I apologize to your audience if anybody is sort of like an avid rower and really knows the sports well. My knowledge is very basic, but I'm going to use this analogy anyway. In rowing, if you've ever seen sort of like a boat, there are 9 people in there, and only one of those people is actually facing the direction in which the boat is facing. So the people who are sort of facing the opposite direction are doing all the work.
Yeah.
They are really putting the muscle in, the power in, and they are moving the boat. And you've got this one individual who looks like they're not really doing much because they're not actually pushing or pulling or anything like that. But they're the only person who's facing the direction in which the boat is going. And they are the eyes and ears and the brain of the team, really, because they need to be able to say, slow down, speed up, you guys are out of sync, and then continuously motivate the guys as they get tired as well. So that in my mind is sort of the best analogy I'd use for what sort of a CEO does. It may often look like they're not doing a lot because they're not sort of doing all the heavy sort of power work in the trenches, but they have a critical role in that they need to keep their eye on the objective, the end goal that the organization is trying to get to, and really always be focused on what comes next, but also watching that the team is well positioned to actually get the organization to that goal. I mean that hopefully makes sense. But that's really how I see it. So I mean, on a day-to-day, I mean, CEOs do a lot of various different things. I feel for them sometimes there's a lot of meetings. I mean, there's a lot of stakeholders that they have to engage with. So there's a lot of thinking, there's a lot of communication, but it really is steering a team, steering an organization, and being forward thinking. Always thinking what comes next. I mean, occasionally, and I guess recently in the world, there's been a lot of firefighting, a lot of problem solving as well. But it's really a large thinking game that they play on a daily basis.
Awesome. I think that's a fantastic analogy. It helps break it down quite nicely. We spoke a lot about leadership, and I think you gave some powerful insights there. When you reflect back on your journey, even currently as a leader, what would you say is your leadership style?
So I'm a proponent of what's known as the servant leadership style. And some I guess famous examples of that would be Martin Luther King, Mother Teresa. So people who are leading, trying to get to a particular objective, but are also very concerned about the development or the wellness of the people whom they lead. So yes, I'm a proponent of reaching a goal. I'm very goal orientated, just sort of quite naturally. I must have a very specific goal that we're working towards, and a very clear plan of how we're going to get there. But I also am very invested in the team's development and the team's well-being, and sort of developing as I lead.
So a number of professionals get to a point where they feel stuck in their careers. They're not moving up, they're not getting opportunities, they feel stagnated. what would you say are some of the things that cause that, and what should they do to get out of that?
So I wouldn't be able to say for sure what causes that, but I mean, I know for a fact that we've all been in that position where you're ready to move on to the next thing. I think the frustration comes from knowing you no longer want to be doing something, but then you don't know what you could be doing or should be doing next. So I mean, I think the first thing is to be very sure about if this is not working, what will work, and then taking proactive steps towards going in that direction. And proactive steps may be more than just applying for a role, because I've spoken to people where someone says, I know I'm not qualified for the role, but I'm applying anyway. I mean, to be honest, you're going to be applying for a while, most probably. And you really need to then be proactive about upskilling yourself. Making sure that you present better for the role. And then the other thing is sometimes you need to make a lateral move to make an upwards move. So it may be the case that you want to get to a certain position which is higher than the one you have, but the opportunity to do that is not available in your current organization. So you actually need to go to a similar role somewhere else in order to be able to move up. And then the third thing is, where possible, leverage people to sort of open doors for you. Great if you've got a sponsor, as I've spoken to, but I mean, sometimes it's just literally leveraging your networks. And I've had sort of friends of friends approach me to sort of do a warm intro for them and hand in their CV. I mean, organizations are getting a lot of CVs every day, so it does help for somebody who's known and trusted within an organization to pick up the phone for you and speak directly to a hiring manager or HR or recruitment or whatever, and get you seen. So I think fundamentally in all the things I've mentioned, it really is about being proactive. Take the steps, do something. It's quite easy to wallow in self-pity and people fall into that trap. But don't do that. Be proactive and be patient, because as I say, we've all been in that position. I mean, I've moved a lot and gotten into the positions that I wanted to, but it took time. Between me deciding, for example, that I wanted to go into management consulting and actually getting into management consulting was almost an entire year. But like I said, in that time, I was preparing for all these assessments and studying really hard for case studies to ensure that I really improved my chances of being able to get in. So I mean, fundamentally, it really is about being very clear on what it is you're trying to get to, and being proactive about getting there.
Awesome, fantastic. You mentioned you've moved a lot, and in your case, every time you move was a completely different space, so a proper pivoting there. I would imagine in your first few months, there were things that you knew you had to get very acquainted with quickly. How did you go about making sure that you settle in as quickly as possible? Were there specific things that you did? Did you have a 3-month plan, and what was that plan about? Maybe you can give us some insights there on what's the best way to pivot and make sure you succeed in your next role.
So I believe in getting stuck in from day one. I don't believe in sort of taking the time to get comfortable. I think the phrase is settling your feet under the table or whatever. I don't believe in that. So really getting stuck in, getting to know the people in the organization, gathering information about the company, gathering information about the industry. As I said, there's a lot of information available about absolutely everything online nowadays. So, really researching an organization, what's being said about it, all the good, the bad, the ugly, and then speaking to people, understand sort of the politics in the environment you're in, so that you can avoid them, not get involved in them, and putting your hand up. Like I said, when I first went into investor relations, a lot of days I woke up and the day ahead was daunting, and that's because I put my hand up and said I can do X, Y, Z, or I'm going to deliver X, Y, Z by Friday, and it was Wednesday, and it was getting rough, but I committed to sort of diving in, being in the deep end, learning, failing if I failed, as fast as possible, so that I could get to a point where I was adding real value in the role I was in. Yeah.
Fantastic. Earlier on, you mentioned some of the key habits that CEOs have, which you believe make them successful. When you look at your own life, can you share with us some of their habits that you practice maybe on a daily basis, weekly basis, and these keep you grounded, that help you do well, in whatever you do?
I take a lot of time to think. So I really allow myself the time to do nothing but think. And I'm not even sort of somebody who's a big fan of meditation or sort of those type of relaxation things. I rather prefer sort of exercise, solo exercise, or going for a long run, going for a really tough gym session, headphones on. But using the time to think through things that have happened that day, to think about sort of challenges we're facing, to do introspection if I've received certain feedback which may or may not be positive. But I think that is key, and I mean, it seems like a simple thing to do, but I think increasingly nowadays it's actually becoming quite difficult to do, because we are so constantly immersed in stuff. I think the social media thing has just resulted in everybody always doing something. And I guess the world sort of becoming more digitized and working from home, and not being able to sort of leave work at the office has made it difficult to take time to just think. So that's something I really do prioritize. I'm also a big fan of sort of mental and physical wellness. It's absolutely key. A lot of people, especially early on in professional careers, aspire to roles where they're working, 7 days a week, they're hardly sleeping, they're living on coffee, but that's actually not sustainable. And you need to sort of take care of yourself in a way that, that makes your work-life balance sustainable. So I protect my team's sort of weekends quite fiercely. Obviously, weekend work sometimes needs to happen, but I don't think it should ever become a norm. So physical and mental well-being is very important. And that for me personally includes sleep, which is why I don't understand the 4 a.m., 5 a.m. club. I believe in a good 8 hours. I guess
you're the late.
Yes, I am a night owl. So, but I do believe in a solid 8 hours, as many days in the week as you can get them. But I mean, I think all of those things really speak to taking care of you, really, so that you can be the best that you can be. And then another one I touched on earlier, which is absolutely important for me, is the learning, the constant learning. And it's not just sort of traditional school or book learning. I think some of my best learning has come from learning from other people's experiences. I love to travel, and more so for the fact that I then get to meet people in different sort of social, cultural contexts. And that different perspective is always such a great learning. So I'm constantly learning. Friends and family that know me know I'm like a fact file of random facts, and that's because I'm constantly wanting to learn new things, and I'm very curious. And you need to be. Nowadays, if you're going to be a successful person, you absolutely need to be curious. You need to be interested in the world around you. You need to understand the trends going on around you. I'm not the biggest sort of, I'm not the biggest fan of social media in the sense that I'm not really involved. But I mean, I understand generally, what's sort of trending, what's happening, even though I'm not actively involved most of the time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
In a nutshell, those are the things.
You mentioned earlier that you spent 6 months, I think it was, in London. Can you just take us there? How was the experience for you? You know, any interesting stuff that you learned there?
So it was a great experience. Obviously, living in another country always has its challenges. I'm a true African in the sense that I struggle with cold weather, and I was in London from about January. I've never been so cold in my life, and there wasn't even snow, so that was challenging. But I think the different sort of cultural context and behaviors and things was quite interesting for me. I was quite fortunate that I was then able to use the opportunity of being in London to travel to other European countries, which was an absolutely phenomenal experience. Yeah. And once again, I think it wasn't so much about the places, but the people I met. And I guess even though in itself it was such a great learning and such a great experience, there's also really great shopping in London, I have to mention. What I really missed, what I found I really missed was the people of South Africa. Yeah. And sort of coming back, I had quite a heartwarming experience at the airport. And when I say people, I'm not just talking about my people, as in my family and my friends, but the energy that is South Africa. So when I came in and was at the airport and was sort of at the immigration part, the lady looked at my passport and could obviously see that I'd left 6 months earlier. Yeah. And even though I didn't know her, she was just like, "Oh, Sissy, you're back. We really missed you. Welcome home." And that is what I missed. Yes. So I mean, I know that as much as I love traveling, and I'm probably going to do more of it. I've done a lot of it in the roles that I've been in. I'm passionate about this country, and it really is home. And yeah. Awesome,
fantastic. My last question for you is, what is your next big chapter?
So, I mean, I mentioned briefly that I'm very passionate about skills development, and for most, for most of my life, I have been in some way or form involved in education programs, so outreach programs, teaching. I quite enjoy teaching, I guess, because I myself enjoyed school so much. And what sort of became frustrating for me in being involved in programs where you teach students and hope that they'd be then equipped to do more with their lives. I mean, that's not always the case, because it's just not enough. So I took a step back to say, okay, let me build the skill set and the network to give myself the bandwidth to be able to do more. So definitely the next chapter is using everything I've learned up to now, all my personal successes up to now, the networks I've built, and the influence I've been able to, the influential position I now find myself in, to do something more, in terms of skills development in this country. And I think as people, we have something that we are really passionate about, and something that really bothers you about the current situation or the status quo, and that for me is South Africa's unemployment rate. So every time those stats come out, something in my heart really just sinks. So for me, a successful life will be one in which I have made some impact in this nation in terms of skills development, which will help to reduce to some extent the unemployment rate. Because I have done a lot of research in terms of just trying to understand why South Africa's unemployment rate is so high. And the reality is there are jobs, there are a lot of jobs, but we cannot fill the jobs because we don't have the right skills to, for those people to be in those roles, which means fundamentally we're going wrong in terms of education and we're going wrong in terms of skills development. So that's the space I want to play in. That's sort of my passion project. What that looks like practically right now, I'm not entirely sure, but I quite like the fact that COVID and the lockdowns kind of propelled us into a world where education is not restricted to a classroom anymore. So there's definitely opportunity to reach the masses and upskill large groups of people, using sort of digital methods.
Yeah.
And that's probably the route I'm going to go. But like I said, I'm still working on it, working it out in my head. But that's the passion.
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Nomonde. I really enjoyed chatting to you today, and I think you've shared some very powerful insights. I learned a lot myself, and so yeah, thank you for being open with us. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me once again, and I really do hope that some of what I've said today resonates with the audience, and that I will have helped someone in some way to progress or help them along their career journey.
Fantastic.